weren't there before.
I don't know, something used to, I don't know.
I couldn't believe that bus driver too.
Yeah, that's something running to the people who do this.
They're on the same days as policy.
It was a chin strap.
That's,
Yeah, I noticed that too. Wait a minute, does that mean we have one this
So I
Wednesday?
got down to Latham, I saw
Oh,
them two
good.
other
Actually,
buses.
that's really good.
I'm like,
That's
they're just, I'm like, what
Oh,
the
me
hell are you
tomorrow.
doing?
ongoing, I'm telling you, it's ongoing about it, everywhere, everything.
No, not tomorrow.
Oh, next week?
Next week.
Is there a way to change
But all I saw was her,
mine?
and I'm trying to call.
Green
So
stays
you
active,
should have saw me, I'm like,
goes into sleep mode or shuts itself
So,
down.
but the other night,
Yeah, I was gonna say,
friends,
I don't know, I'm not,
the night before policy, I'm always up there.
maybe under seven.
Yeah, I gotta learn how to do that better. Bob sent me a system.
Don't
What's the
find
system?
yourself dying, because it's like cold
I never,
plastic, so let that follow me.
I was never debriefed on how to do that. It's,
Kid's dad.
I felt like it was flying by the seat of your pants in the beginning.
Well, that's,
Hey, he's like,
I certainly,
Settings.
stuck down in the corner.
But I think it's good that he,
It's like one of our neighbors, moved our neighborhood, and the
He just
neighborhood
gave me
decided
how
they
he
were
did
going
it.
to do a farewell party.
how's that?
So I little had to
Oh,
pass it, because I drove down, and somebody recognized me, hey, that's awesome.
So
And I
what
like
I
cracked
was
my
gonna
window,
say
I was
is,
like,
one thing that I
so,
have observed is that,
you guys
in
aren't
the
as
beginning I used to
concerned
write
as I
down a
am
bunch of
about
questions, and I tried to go over them, but
the
they go
COVID
through
clusters
everything
that
really
happen
fast.
in neighborhoods.
So it's
You
really
guys were like,
hard.
well, we all started
The
out
thing is
social
that,
distance, but the more we
it's better
drink,
to actually
the
put
closer we get
your
together.
comments right in the document, and that way they,
oh,
they're
Yeah.
These parents get it, and then they give it
give it
to
the kid, yep,
and then it becomes
Oh, okay.
yep,
I don't know how they can show me, but
outside your door,
No, it is, it's really helpful.
Outside your door.
That way, you know, all your questions.
shows up as you.
outside your door.
Okay. That's
Do you
good.
get your pool?
That helps.
Did they start the pool?
And yeah, it just, that way,
Didn't
you
start the
know,
pool.
God said Saturday. He said farmers, get it towards the end of the month, we'll get started.
Freaking me out, man.
I'm gonna have
Got
the
it.
Like that, yeah.
sprinkler guy come in Friday to,
And there's something
cap off.
conducive to that, if
they're
you
gonna
just
be
want to ask a
digging up all
general
the
question.
sprinklers
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
backyard.
You
Cap
can ask
also
general
will create
questions
another
about
mess.
it.
So he's coming
They
Friday, so
answer
I'm trying to do all this
And I did
preventative
do
stuff.
one general one last time.
Okay.
All right, ready?
So Todd and Christina, we're going to start a meeting. I'm going to share the screen. So all you'll see is the agenda screen. Okay. Okay? Hold on, Kevin, 1 second. Let me share the screen and we get started.
Okay, thank you.
Loud and clear.
And by the way, please mute your, but you should be seeing the screen right now. Good, Kevin. I'm set.
We're good? We'll call this meeting to order. To start, let's have the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And some announcements. Just as you can see in the background, or you cannot see them, Christina and Todd are virtual tonight for personal reasons. So can I have a motion to adopt an agenda? Naomi is first, Bob is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. Motion passes. Okay, so now we're moving on to, so tonight's a study session. Study session meetings are designed for the purpose of having, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, I made my announcements. Hold on. I can't read my own writing here. All right, study session meetings are designed for the purpose of having administrative updates to the Board of Education. There are no public comments at the study session meetings. Residents may attend the next scheduled business meeting on October 6, 2020, and/or contact the board via email at boe@shenschools.org with any comments or questions. All questions come into the Office of Public Information Officer and are shared with the board and/or superintendent as appropriate. Policy questions, concerns are typically addressed by the board president. Operational questions, concerns are typically addressed by the superintendent and/or designee. Okay. So right now, we're going to move into focus topic for discussion. And we put this on here as before, if there's any key topics for us at the board table or virtually, if we want to bring up to discuss. Tonight is kind of the kickoff, in my opinion, nationally, right? We got the first presidential debate. I'm sure we're going to lose some viewers to that tonight. But I didn't bring my popcorn, but I'll get it later. So with that, I just, for my comment here is, as I pick up the paper or I look nationally or even on the evening news, the COVID cases continue to rise. You can see that in our own backyards. Looking through, you can see it on the NISBA clips, or you can read it in the Times-Union. And I'm saying this only because even as we've encountered isolated instances, as big of a school district as we are maintaining the integrity of the plan that we put forth, and we continue to put all the resources behind it to be steadfast. So I'm very proud to announce that and stand behind the leadership that continues, and the administrators in our school, and our schools and our kids that are doing a great job. So I just wanted to put that out there. One other piece too, just my thought, is that, again, looking around me, I've started to go outside my four walls and really take inventory on more perceptually what's going on. Not that I wasn't doing that before, but more, because we're living this life as well as everybody else nationwide and around us in our community. And I continue to see the inequities, and we're going to talk more about that tonight, I'm sure, with the NISBA resolutions and any further comments that my colleagues have. I continue to see the inequities in resources and what's given in the playing field right now to students. Not here, because we are very fortunate for the technology resources that all of our students are able to get, food, everything. And I'm just looking around me, and it's deafening sometimes when I read it or I see it, because it's not that far away from us. And it exists. It still exists. And now it's magnified more because of the landscape that we're in. So I just wanted to say that comment, because it's just every day, it's kind of eating away at me. And I can't help but share my own feelings around the dinner table with my kids. I've heard no complaints from them, one sixth grader, one senior, just happy to be back in kind of a semi-quasi-normal environment. So that's my comment. Bob?
Yeah, just a comment as far as education during the pandemic. That's really what we're at. Very encouraged just by the comments my student has. You can tell it's March and we're shutting things. We're no longer teaching in the school. But the schedule is kind of running to the finish line in March. When you come in September, the students can make the year of what they want to make it. And very encouraged by the approach to extracurricular activities, where the message is, hey, you're going to be very limited. Here's the standard. The standard has been applied in the classroom, but you can still have a club do things. And we're starting to hear that, and just the level of enthusiasm towards the classroom instruction, because half the time is spent here in the building versus all the time spent at home. So I've been very encouraged just by the level of engagement and the level of optimism. And for those factors, I think that's why it's there, and we need to take advantage of it as much as possible. So thank you.
Anybody else?
I think one of the most important things that we're doing that reaches beyond our own boundaries is dealing with the inequity, inclusiveness, lack of diversity, discrimination. And it has been brought to our doorstep, and I understand that we're making an effort to communicate with the group that has kind of coalesced around the issue. and try to reach some sort of understanding so that there's a vehicle by which we can have a dialogue and it's not going to be, yelling at one another or grandstanding. I've learned a few things over the years, partly because it was one of my graduate minors was sociology, another one psychology. This isn't a whole lot, but more so when I was president of a teachers association and we were in difficult negotiation situations. I learned about organizing and bringing together a group. And I learned some things are good and some things are not so good. If you wish to have an effective group, you can't lead from too far out in front. On the other hand, you have to build a consensus around issues that you have to, unfortunately, vilify the person who's on the other side of the table. And all of those things bring people together. That is, one side together, but they don't bring them together in terms of settling the problems that you're dealing with. The reality is that even at the bargaining table, there's a certain amount of grandstanding and so forth. So oftentimes the reality is that chief negotiator from one side and chief negotiator from the other side will take a walk. Now we're getting very honest and straightforward with one another, and if they're both committed to reaching a resolution, they can do it. I think there's something to be learned there. I don't know how we do it, because we have limits to what can be dealt with in executive session and so forth. But I believe we do need, if we want to help the group help themselves and help everybody else in the school district and so forth, we have to have a vehicle wherein we can talk directly and honestly with one another without rabble-rousing, if you will. That's very important. You also have to have some sense of whether the individuals that are on the various sides honestly want a solution or whether they simply like being in the limelight and are looking to perpetuate that. I'll give you an example. This is only my opinion. But when the Palestinian PLA, PLO, was headed by Yasser Arafat, I have no doubt that that man had absolutely no interest in getting a final solution with Israel. Why? Because then he would have been irrelevant. He would have no longer been an important person and so forth. So you have to be aware of that possibility as well. I don't want to portray us as being Big Brother or that we know better, but I think in the process of talking with one another, we have to help each other understand that we really need to focus down on those issues that are really meaningful and not just creating a lot of static, heat, and smoke. That'll really be meaningful to the parties, represent real gains. And so I hope we have a way of doing it. I know you've in a smaller group, but I really would like to see somehow that there was greater participation on the part of the board, so forth.
Are you asking for the conversation to be broadened, Gary? I'm sorry, are you asking for the conversation to be broadened with the outside community members?
Primarily those who are most actively involved in the movement.
I got you. Okay.
We certainly it would be beneficial ultimately to have more people involved. If you looked at the civil rights movement in the 1960s, you had Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, you had CORE, you had NAACP. Each and every one of those was very level-headed about the approach to trying to advance the rights of our black citizens. There were some others that were a little bit more radical and a little more assertive, shall we say. But the three major ones were able to keep the other ones in line because they knew that there were people out there who would oppose them almost on principle, and they didn't want to give them they wanted to give them absolutely no reason for using violence against them. If they did, then they were definitely and unequivocally the bad guys. And I think there's a certain amount of education that we can do for each other. Right now, I think if we look at our own society, we see those who cling on to the fact very quickly and very strongly, better word available, but can't come up with it, to those things that are, destructive, violent, and so forth and so on. These are the minorities, but it flavors the overall movement. And so there really needs to be some effort made to get this under an umbrella of people who understand what they really want, what's really important, and know how to achieve it without antagonizing the other people. I'm not talking about hurting their feelings here. I'm talking about getting them really angry so that they want to strike back. That's it.
I have a question. For my own clarity, are we talking about amongst us? Or are we talking about in the district? Or are we talking? I'm a little bit confused.
I think the only thing we can really control is what happens.
Right. So I just needed to clarify for myself. Okay. I agree. I think that lots of conversation needs to happen. I think people have to be able to ask themselves some hard questions like we've talked about. And I don't know where we do that. I don't know if we do that right here. I don't know if we do that in a private meeting. I'm not sure. But I think that it's imperative for us to move forward in a healthy way.
I would like to think that we could do it here, but unfortunately, I think we might fall victim of that need to act out, to make accusations and to make issues beyond what exists, that sort of thing, that doesn't lend itself to the dialogue. I think it has to be in a situation where we can talk candidly, they can talk candidly,
Right.
and we have a real heart-to-heart and a common understanding. And as I started out to say, I don't know how we do that, because it seemed like virtually the only way we could do that would be in a executive session. And I don't think it's an appropriate, as far as I understand, I don't think it's an appropriate topic for an executive session. Maybe it could be some form of a workshop, I don't know.
I actually do
Maybe
think
that
it's
would
an
be
appropriate
okay.
topic for an executive session, but it's not an appropriate topic for an executive session. I take it back.
No, it's not that, Guston, don't take anything back at all. What we can do is structure, we could have more retreats. That's how,
That's
you
okay,
you just do that. We
Yeah,
could certainly have more open discussions like that.
So I think we have to be careful, because if it's for training, for developing us as a board, that's appropriate for a retreat. If it's driving policy, if we're talking about the direction the district should go, that has to be in the open forum.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, and to your point, I think, yes, it's easy to have a villain and to rally a group against the enemy, but what breaks that down is listening and showing real empathy. And people know when it's staged and you're just putting on a good face. They know if you're sincere or not. And so I think that's where we start. And I've said this before, and I believe it with my whole heart, and that is we can drive it with policy. I know it sounds really dry and boring, but that's where we start, because we're the governing body, and that's where our superpower is. But as far as what to do outside the meeting, I feel that training's appropriate, obviously, if it's personnel matters. But I feel very uncomfortable if we were to take this out of the public forum. Talking about the inequities that group has brought forward. And I also think that we should hear from more than just the two, because it's a much bigger group and everyone has their stories, and it'll help, I think, as we
We have our students.
yes, and
definitely-
our students, absolutely, yes. And it'll get us to a better place. where it's really been, we're all being lifted up. We're not leaving, so someone else isn't getting marginalized. It's
Yep.
looking at the,
Yep.
and I think we'll all be better for it at the end, but it's going to be a long road.
And if I can make a comment as well, if that's appropriate at this time. I think one of the things is that we have been taking, I'm going to say small steps to move forward and having more dialogue with the group that has been very, very proactive, as well as our current students who had some thoughts and ideas as well. One of the things, though, I'm cautious about is that, as you all know, is that we have careful consideration moving forward, that we're doing it the right way, that we're not just, having efforts and just trying to, as I say, a Band-Aid approach. Because as we know, the results, the outcomes, the positive change that we can make is not going to happen overnight. And I think if, all groups involved, not only the board, but the students, the community, a lot of the groups that are, like I said, being proactive for what they feel, needs to be done, is having that understanding. In addition, a lot of times when we've heard that, Naomi, you brought up a great point about, they feel like we're the enemies. One of the things is that that's hard because, we're not fighting each other. Instead, we want to work together. We truly believe and are passionate about making sure we right the injustice, that we have equity for all of our students, especially our students, our BIPAC and also LGBTQI+, that we want to make sure that we can be on the same footing, the same page, but understand we have to have a thoughtful process of what's the best way to go about that without, like we mentioned, without some of the hostility, the misunderstandings. We all need to work together and learn together how to move forward. And I think, unfortunately, because of COVID too, and not using that as an excuse, but with reopening schools, and unfortunately our focus has been on that. But we have made some stride as well as working with these groups for equity. But again, it's not an overnight thing, and we have to all learn to be patient again to make sure we do it the right way, a meaningful way, with positive outcomes and things that we can sustain. We always say that as a district, things we can sustain. So that's just my thoughts.
Thank you, Christina. Todd, do you have anything?
I just, to basically go off of what Christina just said, I think communication is the biggest thing in our meeting, not to go into all the details of our meeting that we had a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. But a big component of that conversation was the communication and some of the actions that we were taking and some of the things that we are doing to become better as a district were not necessarily clear to the group. And just that brief meeting really did help. Was it the last meeting we're going to have? No. Did it solve everything? No. But it was a good, open communication. Cards were on the table, and I think all parties left with a better understanding of a willingness to work together at the table, offers to help, and I think it was very positive. I think that's a good first step, but it's one step. There's going to be many, many more.
Yeah, and I just think here we are. We were not having these conversations last year, right? So what I'm seeing is we are having conversations here. We have an option to take them away from the table. We have an option to do a retreat. We have many avenues in front of us, and it's incumbent upon us to take every advantage that we possibly can to administer and do what we need to do. So
One more thing.
yeah,
I know there was talking about and drawing more and more people in. I think we need to perhaps not start on a large scale because it becomes unwieldy. There are too many opinions and so forth. If you can work with a relatively representative group, but a relatively small group, and formulate something that you're reasonably comfortable with, then you bring other people in, and hopefully you build a critical mass around that, and their contribution can make it something they can take ownership of. But if you start with too many people all at the same time, I think the problem is that oftentimes you go virtually nowhere.
Well, we have our diversity committee, right? And some of us are on the diversity committee, so, some good conversations can start there, that we can report back on and share.
Mhm.
Which will be useful.
Many avenues. We have many avenues in front of us. So, okay. Thank you, everybody, for that dialogue. So it's great. Okay, moving on to Dr. Robinson, comments.
Sure, I'm just going to transition the microphone. We have several presentations of plans, and Dr. will be coming forward to do the first two, and Mrs. Smiley, if I'm not mistaken, will be doing the second two. So at this point, as Dr. will come forward, I open this document, so it's available for all to see.
Good evening. This is the time of year we bring our annual plans forward to the Board of Education for approval, and they become attached to policies in the district and also part of some of our required uploads to the State Education Department. The first being the technology integration plan, and obviously we build off the previous year's plans. However, this year it was very obvious to us that we had done a whole lot that may not in another year have been recorded. And so this graphic that you see actually comes from the Future Ready framework. I don't know if you're familiar with the Future Ready framework, but it is an organization that helps schools envision how they should be looking at technology. And this represents their various gears or components. And so I would highlight areas that I think we pay particular attention to and really adjusted some of the work that we did in the last year. Curriculum instruction and assessment, the amount of efforts in the IMS department, basically our IT department, in supporting the instruction that was happening in the virtual environment cannot be overstated. It was an incredible lift from, wait, we've always accessed this program from within school. How do we now do it virtually? Wait, we have hundreds of kids who need devices. Ken reminded me today, Ken McDermott, our director of Information Management Services, said, do you remember when you sent the message, and I think it was Friday, March 13th, Dr. Robinson and I were meeting. He got a text from me at 11 a.m. saying, send devices home with every elementary teacher today. Today. At 11 a.m. they got that message. They were in the hands of elementary teachers by 1:30. So the idea of being able to very quickly shift what we were doing and make sure we were prepared to address the curriculum instruction and assessment from afar. The personalized professional learning is the next block.
Can you just test into the microphone?
I hear it, yeah. A tremendous amount of professional development has been offered in the last 6 months to support teachers. When we first went out, there were a number of teachers, most of us did not know how to do a Google Meet, and now we look back 6 months and we think, that will never not be part of our professional work. The fact that we drove all around the district to meet with each other face-to-face for 15 and 20-minute meetings sometimes, right? And sometimes it's great. We want to have FaceTime. We want to be in the schools. But the efficiencies for quick touch-base meetings, that will never go away. But that's an example of the types of professional learning that were being provided by our coaches back in March. Now, the professional learning that they're doing has evolved well beyond that to how do we set up cameras so that the students at home can see the kids in the classroom and the instruction from the teacher and what's being projected on the board. And then how are we recording parts of it and posting it later for asynchronous access. So, these are conversations when we were here a year ago, we would not have thought to have, and we wanted to make sure was reflected in our technology plan. Obviously, there are other key areas that have been very important. I'll talk specifically about use of space and time. We are using space and time like we have never. We're currently doing things that the Future Ready framework thought we should have been doing 10 years ago, and when we looked at it, we thought, well, okay, I don't know where they think that's going to happen. But then all of a sudden,
sudden you're confronted with a pandemic, and all of a sudden you do look at time differently, and you do look at space differently, and a number of the recommendations have actually come to fruition, and we've operationalized it right here within Shenendehowa. So that's just a brief overview. We wanted to highlight a few of the things from the plan that are different this year than have been previous years. And I really do want to recognize both the tech coaches, our technology coaches, who have never worked harder in providing support to teachers, and to the IMS department, who have the time, just even the relocation of teacher desks at the high school, where they could no longer be in tight clusters and they needed to be 6 feet apart, and the moving of those desks where there were no data ports and phone lines to prepare for the first day of school, on top of everything else. That's just one small example of unforeseen work that needed to be accomplished in order to reopen the school, and we're in pretty good shape because of a lot of extra efforts and a recognition that it was really important to all of us to have school ready to open again. So that's kind of an overview of the technology plan. Any questions related to technology?
In community partnerships, page 11, you do mention a couple things that we're doing to address. Do you think we could do more, and do you think we have gaps? And I'm not hearing your gaps in our district, but you definitely read about it with other districts in the capital region.
Yeah, we sure do. In fact, Mr. McDermott and I were talking about that today. What's our preparedness with our collecting the 9th grade Chromebooks, right? Because we were able to do a refresh in the 9th grade Chromebooks. We're collecting back devices that are 3 and 4 years or 4 years old. We would not have thought to keep them in our rotation. They probably would have been phased out, aged out, but now we're going to be holding on to those for in the event. We certainly hope we don't end up like where we were in March, but if we have a real need, they will get in the hands of our students and families while we're awaiting updated devices. And it's been a real challenge to get updated devices delivered to any school district, but we are very intentionally building up our reserves. It may not be with the flashiest of items, but it's certainly better than having nothing. Additionally, we, and Ken has been working on securing hotspot jetpacks. So it's basically like mobile hotspots. Do they work perfectly? No. Are they very expensive? Yes, they are. Do we try to consider all other options, even driving to campus and using the Wi-Fi from your car, if possible? Yeah, and it's probably more reliable in some cases. But we are prepared and have done that for some families where there have been absolute needs. So we are working to be prepared to support our students as needed. Are we where we need to be yet? Not fully. We also have had on our district website, and it's deep down, I don't know that anybody would find it easily, a list of public Wi-Fi availability in the community. But again, I don't know, that you were going to go in April to the McDonald's in Half Moon and sit and use the Wi-Fi, right? So the pandemic, I think, impacted how some people looked at the availability of publicly available community resources.
So thank you for this. This is an amazing document. You've covered training and policy and what's happened with COVID. So thank you, Ken. Thank you, Dr. Wood. I'm looking for the November. I think our first guided meeting is November 3rd. So I'm assuming we're going to be talking about this. But it just captures everything that's been done, as you pointed out. The SAMR model talks about everything. So it's the first time I've seen everything in one place. So thank you for that. But the other thing I wanted to add is I went to the Utica Mutual cybersecurity seminar, and I feel like even for that, we're in a good place. I'm not saying that there's not more that can't be done, but we're in a good place because to all of a sudden have to go virtual, if we were not there with the digital citizenship and the work that was being made, progress in that area, we'd be much more vulnerable now, because what they had pointed out is that spikes in education as far as ransomware attacks, went off the chart in the spring, and it's still happening because schools were not prepared for educating students in that environment. And so as far as the personally identifiable data, how to handle that, understanding the restrictions if someone's in another state and still registered in our school district. or out of the country and still registered in our school district. The implications of all this, all of a sudden, is on our radar, but we're much, much better positioned to handle it. So I was looking through this, and I was looking for something specifically, because I was thinking about our youngest learners, because you were saying, if we have to shift, we want to have devices in their hands. And I'm thinking specifically K through 3, because that's the group where there's devices not in their hands right now. Unless I believe CDL, yes.
If they requested, if they did not
requested
have a device that was reliable in the home, they could request a device. And right now we are essentially one device to one student, although it's shifted because our planning happened when we had 24 students in a classroom. So now we're at the 18s, and so when I say this, it's kind of using pre-COVID information, but we're essentially one-to-one Chromebook to student in grades 3 through 5. And we're clusters of iPads in every elementary classroom.
Right. Okay. And I saw in here it's 8 iPads per class. So in the COVID world, do they share those iPads?
In the COVID world, they are being wiped off. That's the intent. Yes. And may not necessarily be 8, because where we had 4 sections and now have 6 sections, there's some additional dividing that has happened, or they get wiped down and shipped to the classroom next door. We're also looking at pulling back some of the resources that have been in the libraries, because use of the library is different at this time. If we had seen this coming, we've done a pretty aggressive rollout of one-to-one. We probably would have done an even more aggressive rollout K-5.
Okay. And so obviously well, I shouldn't say obviously, but I am familiar with Seesaw enough from checking it out that it's a touchscreen type app that can be adapted to a Chromebook, but it's ideal in a touchscreen like the tablet and the iPads. So what about the groups that quarantine? That now they're shifting out. So because it has just happened, that the K through 2. So what do you do for them?
So it's challenging. It depends, because there are so many different scenarios.
Okay.
So it's where are the students, where is the teacher, but it's primarily live streaming in for instruction is the goal. But we're going to have ongoing conversations about this at the elementary level, because at the elementary, we're not entirely set up to pivot easily between in-person and learning from home. 6-12, we are, because our completely virtual students are on the same classroom as they would have been if they were in person. At the elementary level, it was hard, especially in July, to envision a kindergarten teacher saying, okay, 15 in front of me, and you 6 at home. We are going to have to continue to think through that as we go.
Dr. Wood, may I make a comment or a question regarding the mobile hotspots?
Sure.
Yep. Actually, it's a comment. I saw in the national news as a very interesting story and creative of what one of the school districts, and again, I don't recall what community it was, not local though, and again, I don't know what goes into cost and how it actually works, but this one school district had a lot of students. They had over 10,000 students, and they had many that were in rural areas as well as large population of mobile home parks, where they actually had modems and they parked a couple of their school buses within those neighborhoods that had difficulty accessing Wi-Fi. So I thought that was really interesting. Again, I don't know how costly that is or how realistic it is for like our school district. I wasn't sure if that was something, that it would even be something to look into for some of those areas within our school districts, neighborhoods or areas that have that difficulty accessing Wi-Fi, whether financially or for other reasons.
Yes, thank you. Mr. McDermott and I were talking about that earlier today as well, and we have had sporadic success, probably less than we would have hoped, for having Wi-Fi on buses, because, especially if the bus is moving, because it's going cell tower to cell tower, and so kids, especially if they're trying to be on a Google Meet while they're doing that, are dropping. To your point, that probably becomes a really viable solution where we have clusters of need. At this point, we find the need is much more sporadic than can be said to be, oh, this area has an absolute need. We may need to provide a device, but they have reliable Wi-Fi. In another case, they have reliable Wi-Fi, but there are 3 kids at home and mom and dad are working from home and they have 4 devices, but they need a 5th device. So we've had to just kind of flex based on the need identified. But we are aware of that as a possibility if we were to see that moving forward as a real issue. Okay, shifting onto the professional learning plan. It's interesting because we've always previously called it professional development, but the state kind of did a shift in language to professional learning. And what we elected to pull out as the graphic to our professional learning plan were the 6 modules that over the summer, as we were thinking about what's the support to provide to our teachers for return to school, what are the most important things? If we can narrow it down and really get tight on our focus, it's going to be health and safety. It's going to be social emotional learning when we bring kids back into a space that they have not been in since, in some cases, there was an abrupt leaving in March. How to teach and help students learn within a hybrid environment where, and we're demonstrating a little of that tonight where we've got people remoting in, but imagine that every class, every day, some students are in person 40% of the time, other students are in another 40% of the time, and some students at the secondary level are learning from home completely all of the time. And so supporting teachers to be ready for that was a significant priority for the opening of school. Also, enhancing the experience of online learning. Little things such as how do we encourage the setup? How should a lesson plan look so that there are multiple engagements and kids can get up and move and there's still opportunities for students to connect in the classroom? And do we think we're fully there yet? No, but this is one of the focuses as we continue to have professional development with teachers to continue to work on this with teachers as we go, and certainly a focus of professional learning for 2021. Grading for learning. Grading is exceptionally challenging when you don't have everybody in front of you, right? When you've always been used to giving the multiple choice test and you pass it out, and then you stand and you watch everybody take it, right? And then you collect it. So what are some other ways we can look at how we're assessing student learning? And then what are our grading practices? And there's a ton of research out there on quality grading practices, which we continue to make available. And really our grading policies as adopted 5 or 6 years ago by this board are very much in support of progressive style grading practices that really support learning and just learning for the sake of learning and our motivational strategies. And then the 6th area of focus has been Google Classroom and other tech tools and Seesaw. And in terms of Google Classroom, little things down to how do you structure, like what's the naming convention of your Google Classroom so that it looks more organized when our students go in. And understandably, prior to this year, we hadn't given a lot of direction to teachers, but I think it made us much more sensitive to the experience of students. And then we were able to pull some people together and say, well, what would make sense and how do we give this kind of guideline or guidance? So this was shared with you. The overview just basically is what all the other subsequent pages lead into. It's full of hyperlinks, and these are kind of starting trainings that we've been doing with teachers to get the year off the ground, but certainly much more work to come ahead, and no shortage of topics and areas of focus for professional learning for the 2021 school year.
I just want to say that I was walking down my upstairs hallway today, and my daughter was in her English class, and I have to say that she was so fully engaged. It was really wonderful to hear that she was having an active conversation with kids in the class and the teacher. It made me feel so good that she was participating, but also she was actively engaged, and I loved it. So kudos to you guys.
Well, doing a lot of work, and teachers have been very receptive to the learning, right? Because you can put it out there.
Just another quick comment. This year, obviously, a lot of kids are in a little bit of a better position when it comes to the remote learning as from last year, if you will, when it was just thrust upon. One thing that was impressive to me these last 2 days is having a child that is, temporarily in remote learning, and not going to class for 2 days, it was very seamless for her. She didn't lose anything. She was able to pick right up where she was if she was in the class, and it was easy is the best way I can put it. So that's it.
It's great to hear. Thank you.
So I'd like to, I agree. I think at the high school, or 7 or 6 through 12, I think you're absolutely right. It's easier to pivot because the teachers are teaching in their discipline, their certification. So they have, like you said, 40% that are in person, 40% that are remote, that will be in person for the rest of the week, and then the CDL. So if somebody's quarantined, it's just a switch. It's an easy switch. And so that's what I'm curious about at the elementary level, because they're there 5 days, actually sixth grade too. So I suspect that there's changes being made along the way as we learn. So how are the teachers how are they finding the time to be trained? It sounds like it's a very difficult situation that they're in, or at least that's how it looks from here, because you have separate teachers teaching CVL, and then you have teachers out of their certification teaching, because you need more teachers since all of them are back.
Right, so the teachers who, say the music teacher who's helping out with the instruction and the social distancing is, in our terms, being flanked by the grade level colleagues, right? So they're sharing lesson plans and making sure that kids always have access to primary instruction from the certified teachers. What we are looking at is how do we best provide that instruction, knowing that we're not going to, say, for a 2-week period of time, shift a child's teacher entirely over to the completely virtual, because those rosters are already built at 24 students or 26 students, and so we're not going to just completely shift them over. So we're doing right now a lot of the practices we would have done when students were out previously, sending work home, teachers touching base. We can look at home tutoring for that, but it is going to be something that we keep our eye on. We know what our experience was in the last 10 days. We don't know what the next 10 days hold. If the last 10 days there's a period at the end of that, right, and then we get back to some sense of normalcy, then we probably keep moving forward. If this pattern were to continue, we probably need to take another close look at what we're doing.
So what about at the CVL level, as far as creating assessments, their lesson plan? Right now there's a platform that's been put out there for them, Seesaw, but it's not something that curriculum was built around before. So are the grade levels working together, especially CVL, I'm thinking, but obviously with the others too, because as we've mentioned several times, there could be the need to pivot. And so if they're all in that world, at least we have a smaller group where we're learning from now. But are they working together?
The goal is that they're working together, right? So we have 6 grade levels and 8 variations across. So for me to speak in universal terms would not be wise, right? There would be a great chance that I would be inaccurate. However, there is a lot of emphasis on the need to co-plan with your grade level and the need to plan as completely virtual teachers. So the 2nd grade completely virtual teachers have their own PLC and are meeting and learning and sharing resources together. Those same teachers should also be planning with their grade levels, because the way many of the CVL rosters were created was to keep kids as close to their home school as possible, so that there could be increased communication between the CVL teacher and the grade level that had the child previously. It's a challenge. We have never run 2 schools before in one. We are learning a lot from it. I will say some of the things that we may in some cases need to do some parental reminders. The idea that the student is sitting in the CVL classroom with a snake wrapped around their neck, not going to be okay. Some of the things that, we probably shouldn't have to remind people about, we are needing. So when we talk about the experience of those teachers, some of it is educating the parents in terms of how to be the best support for their child.
Thank you. Actually, with the quarantine, so getting back to that, so when these in-person classes at the elementary level are quarantined, so they're given instructions how to shift, or is that something?
We are working on that. Sometimes, everything has to be case by case. And in terms of case by case, it depends on the teacher's ability to shift quickly. It depends on who will be in the classroom. It depends on was it a co-taught classroom and the other teacher is going to be in person. It depends on is the teacher there and the students are not. Are the students there and the teacher is not? There is no one right answer. We have to evaluate each situation, and we are definitely learning about the most recent experiences and trying to be ready for the next.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Good evening. So the first plan I have to present to you is the special education plan. And if you've been here for a couple of years, you will notice that there are not a lot of significant changes. The enrollment for the various programs and the disability categories have all been updated and are pretty consistent. I will say that our special programs are pretty full at this point, which I would say is not unusual, but certainly noteworthy in the third week of September. The changes to the plan, we've had a functional skills development program, which is a 12-1-1 program, and what we have realized over the past years is that we really have two distinct groups of students. We have students who have developmental disabilities but are a little bit more social and working more towards career readiness, and then we have our students who have more significant needs. Often those students are on the autism spectrum and really struggle with communication and independence. So we have separated our FSD program into FSD, Functional Skills Development, which is still the 12-1-1 ratio, and then Individual Skills Development, which at the elementary school is a 6-1-3 ratio, and at the secondary is an 8-1-3 ratio. So the change this year was just denoting those two distinct programs. The other change is that, as you know, we have opened up our second move classroom at High School West, which was very exciting. That involved some significant renovation to one of the classrooms at West, and we have moved in. It's a beautiful space. Thank you to Kathy and to Barb Salaker for all the work they did on that. It's great, and we have nurses soon in both of those programs. Okay, so special education and COVID, I know Mr. Presley asked me the second night of school, what are the big challenges? And I thought, gosh, I don't even know where to start with that, and I don't know if we could have identified them at that point. But what I can tell you right now is we have worked with the elementary CDL sections, took 3 special education teachers based on our numbers, and have assigned 3 special education teachers to our students with disabilities who are CDL at the elementary level. So we have a teacher doing K2, a teacher doing 3-4, and a teacher doing grade 5. And that was certainly rocky in the beginning, especially with our younger students, but those teachers are working together. Armin and Tamara, the 2 special education academic administrators, are meeting with them on a regular basis so we can troubleshoot what do you need, what are your challenges, and I would say that we're moving forward in a positive direction. We have a meeting coming up on Thursday, just so that we're sure that they're getting the support that they need. One of the struggles, I would say, is at the elementary level for our students in special programs, their teachers are providing both in-person and virtual instruction, and that is difficult with our elementary students. One of the reasons that we didn't do that with our students who are generally in the regular classrooms receiving push and support is that we're concerned with the equity of having 1 student home and 10 students in the classroom, and what would that experience be? But for our special program teachers, we didn't have enough extra staff to go around to create small pods of students and also stay within the regulation of the 36-month age requirement for a special class. So, and then you have 1 student in one program and 1 student in another program, but we are working through that. I have to say our lead teachers have been really super in helping with resources, and they are now working with us on videos for parents, because that is a challenge, especially for the parents of our students with special needs, in knowing how to set up a learning environment for a student who's highly distractible, or a student who struggles to stay on task, and a student who needs things broken down. So that is one of our main goals right now. And then another change with COVID is that certainly we have changes to IEP minutes. So as you know, special education is highly regulated. and we have not been able to provide all of the minutes on an IEP because we have a shortened school day. We had the sudden shift to block scheduling after our IEPs were done, but we are providing as much support as we can within the confines of the different school day, and then also supplementing with additional materials. And then what I have for you, and I really don't need to go over these, but I know Mr. DeLallo especially is often interested in the trends in our enrollment in special education. So I did put together 2 graphs for you. The second graph just shows how, as our enrollment went up and peaked in 2017, you can see that our classification rate also started to peak, but peaked afterwards because the students were here, and then when students graduate, not everybody leaves, and now it's starting to come down. So it was just an interesting visual for you to see what our statistics are looking like in terms of overall classification. Okay, so
No questions? Questions? Anybody really? Great job.
Sorry, I forgot to ask questions. Okay.
Come on, Michelle.
Our Student Support Services Plan. One thing I would like to point out is this is generally the same graphic we've had for a couple of years, but what you'll see with the RTI section is that used to say academic, social, emotional, behavioral, and as you know, social emotional learning, SEL, is really becoming part of our Tier 1, our core instruction. So I took out the social emotional behavioral and replaced it with the more appropriate and current social emotional learning term. But again, we follow a response to intervention model in ensuring that we're providing appropriate Tier 1, whether it's academic or social emotional instruction. And then as we identify students who are at risk or who are struggling, we provide Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions for students. There are not thank you, you know what I'm trying to say, significant changes to our plan this year. What I will point out, however, is that, as you know, at the elementary level, our academic intervention teachers are often in classrooms right now. So in terms of Tier 2, that's supplemental small group instruction for identified skill deficits, that will be we're working with our classroom teachers on how they can provide that in the classroom, because we know students are still going to struggle with those basic skills, especially in reading and math, and we still need to provide intervention. We'll be doing that more in the classroom, and then hopefully for Tier 3, using our special education teachers to support our students who have really individualized needs, so that if they need to be referred to the Committee on Special Education, we have the support and data to move forward. Questions? Yeah.
So, thought occurred to me this spring that this model here, where you have an AIS resource, probably could have helped a lot, because you have this situation occurring once you go with kids out of the classroom where they become disengaged. And did we take advantage of that with the AIS instructors? Were they able to help the non-AIS teachers by enabling the student that's not engaged to become engaged, or is that just not? Is that more just left up to the teacher themselves? It's not an AIS. It seemed to me that this was a good model with that. You know, the teacher wants to teach their class to enjoy their students, and the challenge they have is when they see somebody falling behind. And I've always envisioned AIS as sort of that extra set of eyes and ears and the educational resource that could help that student falling behind or catch them earlier. Did that enhance our instruction this spring and potentially being looked at this fall? Or is it more this is separate from the online classroom?
I would say that really it's separate, because the role of the AIS teacher is to really be filling in those gaps where there's a specific skill deficit. And sometimes that's harder for students to participate in, because it's often an area that they've struggled with over some amount of time. So I think where the benefit of having the academic intervention teachers as classroom teachers is working in their PLCs, they're going to be able to work with the classroom teachers who haven't been providing intervention to say, here's a way that you can provide a quick 15-minute decoding group within your classroom. If that makes sense, really understanding your question.
One thing I'm have a disconnect here is when we say AS instructors are in the classroom, they're not teaching that class. You still have the primary teacher there and the students, but they're off to the side potentially with some struggling students.
So this year they are teaching.
Okay.
So they are all certified teachers. All of our academic intervention specialists are certified teachers who have chosen to go into an academic intervention role. But because we have smaller classes this year, those teachers are in fact teaching regular size
But
classrooms.
it's kind of like they're an embedded coach. In other words,
Right.
they're the next classroom over, they got someone that has not encountered that particular situation, and the one that has one had an AIS instructor can say, here's what you probably want to do, here's what that means, and then they probably talk about it maybe an hour later.
Yes, correct. So in that PLC, in that like second grade PLC, that academic intervention teacher is going to have a lot of knowledge to share with their colleagues who are now going to have to work a little bit differently in their classroom to make sure students are getting that more individual skill instruction.
Would you have used, is this model a model that we were heading toward, or because of the resources, this is what we,
Because of
where we're at?
the resources,
Okay.
right, yeah, we
Okay.
weren't.
Michelle, for
Yes.
for the tier 2 intervention, you had said that these teachers may not be there. Is that for elementary only, or is that for, you said there's a program also in High School West, although we were talking, is that the MOVE program?
That was the
we're
MOVE
talking about?
program.
Okay,
Yes.
so still, I guess it still applies. For the ones that were at the high school, are they now are they at the elementary level teaching?
You mean at middle school,
Middle and high school, I guess, but yes.
so at middle school, we still have almost 4.0 reading teachers who have been connected to and are connected to the special education department, but they have had professional development and they run special reading classes. So that has not changed for our middle school students. And at the high school, of course, AIS is based on lack of success with Regents exams. So that, I believe, is still built into the schedule but at a smaller level. Because again, we've had to reduce our class sizes and we've had to pull staff from our existing staffing footprint in order to do that. And we also didn't have Regents. Boy, right.
So at the high school level, it begs one other question. Are the classes, so all of those kids are back, are they all together, and for that reason, you had to have more sections? Because generally at the high school, it's roughly 40 to 50% because of the way it's divided in the CBL. Do you follow me?
So you're asking about AIS sections at the high school?
Yes.
There's less demand because the majority of students who would have been in those sections would have been in there because they would have failed the Regents exam.
Okay.
Last year, because there was no Regents exam, they just had to pass the course to earn credit for the course, and they didn't have to take the Regents. We were able to get the vast majority of those students through summer school, and the ones that, so they have earned their credits and have moved on, therefore reducing the demand on AIS sections. And we ran very few AIS sections to begin with because most of the students we could get through with summer school previously. But now it's even reduced for just this year because of the Regents exemption, if that makes sense.
Yes. Okay. I didn't realize it worked that way, but thank you for explaining it to me. Thanks.
Any other questions on the Student Support Services Plan?
Thank you very much. Okay. Todd and Christina, you're okay? Can you hear us? Okay, I'm making sure.
Yep, all is well.
Awesome, okay. So for this portion of the meeting, we're going to talk about the NISBA resolutions, and I have asked Bob Presley to lead in this discussion. I have forwarded out to the board a graph, not a graph, but more of a Excel spreadsheet that Bob has put together for us. And basically going through them, I'm sure he has talked and worked with Gary a little bit on this, going through the resolutions and the impact on Shen. So Bob?
Okay, thanks for the opportunity to talk about this. For many years, Gary has been a representative at the business meeting, and I got to see a couple of those because I was an alternate. If you haven't seen one, you have a great opportunity on Saturday, the 31st of October. Really, the NISBA board officers started off, and very quickly they moved into these resolutions. And we have one voting seat. Gary has been in that chair for quite a few years. I'll be in it this time. But it's all going to be virtual if you want to check it out on that Saturday morning, Halloween. Really, this is an opportunity to learn better about ourselves through how other districts have presented resolutions. Other districts have sat down through their advocacy process. Some of them are very narrowly defined. Can you just grab the mic?
Okay, go ahead.
So some of these can be a very narrowly defined resolution to what that district wants, or very broadly defined. And really, we want to come out of this with, from my personal perspective, making sure I represent everybody hears collective thoughts on whether to vote yes or no. But also it's an opportunity to understand where these issues sit within the state of New York, how through the lenses of other school districts, and just as important, the lens of how the NISBA group makes these recommendations. So as you page through this, you'll see, the resolution itself, some background, and then why NISBA is saying yes or no. And so the major finding for me, now this is one major step. There's probably a couple more steps before the 31st of October where we can get your comments back, factor them in. I've had some separate conversations already, but either around the table, but we will probably, and I'm willing to do this on the next meeting or a meeting later, kind of go into the specific details of why these things may have been changed. But you have to look at it in several lenses. NISBA is saying, hey, yes or no for the following reasons. Districts are saying things, and we have a deciding point of whether we vote to agree or concur with NISBA saying yes or no. I think coming out of this, we want to come up with a really good idea of what we advocate in front of the state assembly when we do the lobbying day. And I think we also want to realize how much we don't have unlimited resources. We've got a limited amount of time, energy, money. So you really have to pare it down to what you think is important for the given year. So I went through the process and putting it in a sheet, and I put the resolution. I'd say what the NISBA concurrence was, whether it was important to us. Some of these are not important to us. It might be important to a district, so that kind of bears it away. The major finding is I kind of agree with NISBA from looking at it, but there are some things, particularly when you look at the costs and some of the equity that is indirectly impacted, you may want to reconsider that. Maybe that's probably subject of another meeting, probably in 2 weeks. But I grouped them in several areas. One is the first paragraph of a strong message to take action that NISBA has agreed to, and I sent that out by email. If I were to do this again, I'd probably put it up as a page. But a lot of this comes to things that we've already talked about. One is we need to improve the funding to New York State, because we are looking at mid-year reduction. That's clearly in the news, and that's clearly something that does not impact us right now, but it's not going to go away until it gets resolved. And we all know that it's even beyond the state to resolve it right now. One resolution on overhauling the testing system. Okay, great in principle, but where I'm finding is perhaps that's not realistic in terms of the amount of mandated requirements in the current test. Do you unpack them? Do you do that? But that's something that was a strong action for NISBA to take. So I'm going to go relook at how they responded to the resolution. Two things that I thought were very prevalent that resonate extremely well: expand opportunities for online learning and address the digital divide. And we think that's clearly to keep as a yes. And there's several that really relate to creating balance in how we manage special education differences between a parent and the district or a student in the district, and due process claims. So I think I've received some comments that might be more of a challenge, but we need to understand the specific language of where that goes. And then improving protections of students by training and reinforcing those advocating for special needs students. I may clarify those a little bit more as well, but for me, the ones I see, there's a strong message where we have both concurrence with other districts, NISBA and ourselves, are improving the funding, online learning opportunities, and addressing the digital divide. And just in 1 year, that can keep you very busy in terms of taking all your resources and just advocating for that. So we have to factor these in, but that's kind of where I see the big, heavy items are. And I look forward to your comments as to what I just said, because you might think that's wrong, or you might think that could be expanded. Next paragraph is things that NISBA said not to pursue, and I would kind of agree. Addressing healthcare cost management, more of a national issue. Tenure requirements, some districts said run tenure every 5 years. That seems like a very difficult one to support. So we would concur with saying no to that. And then these smaller areas that I would say are kind of defined and I think properly categorized. Avoiding unfunded mandates. That's always a thing that the NISBA community is sensitive to. We can't sign up to things that we can't fund. And resolutions 8 and 12 are in line with that. And the next item, as I said, retaining current checks and balances. So our process has checks and balances. Somebody was advocating 3 resolutions, and NISBA said no. And I would kind of agree with maintaining the current checks and balances that we have in our system. And the last item, or kind of relatively, but I would say, improving communications. One of them involved a database management between schools and Department of Health. I would say that's something where a small group can figure out how to improve communications. Another was an oversight area where there's an audit process, and school districts ask for more than one seat when the audit is reported out. That clearly is something that district felt a lot of pain, and we should learn from that and say, yeah, that would make sense to build that. These don't cost a lot, but they do improve the communication oversight that we want to have to always improve how education is run in New York State. So that's kind of a summary, a synopsis. This is kind of a broader look, digging into it. That's the first phase. And the next meeting, in between now and then, if you've got specific concerns and comments, I'm going to try to encapsulate them within a week, get them back to you. Some of them are more, great idea that we say yes to this, but not sure how we're going to pay for it. And so we'll summarize it that way. But overall, I would say that what they're saying yes to are things that we, at a first look, would say yes to. What they're saying no to, we'd also say no to. Mm-hmm. So I hope that helps. It's a process ongoing, but we hope by the time we kick off on October 31st, everybody's informed, everybody's aware, and is comfortable with our vote that we take. Okay?
So
Thanks, Bob.
on Monday, Bob, BOCES is having this meeting, and they did say, I asked about this. You're welcome to come, because they're also going to be voting, and they're going to be talking about these same resolutions at that meeting. So if you'd like, I can ask Mary Beth Bruno to send you an invite so that you can be part of that discussion. They were actually, they had a lot to say about Gary and how his feedback, and you were an excellent representative for BOCES. And actually, you were for Shen too. You had the opportunity to vote, to cast 2 votes. So I did have a couple of observations. One is, first, nice job pulling this all together, because it did make it a lot easier to go through and to see what your comments were, and then just to jump to those. I also liked them that they pushed all the ones to the bottom that they did not approve, so that you could also jump to see, okay, well, what are the reasons? And you're absolutely right. Although there's somewhere there's an unfunded mandate that they moved it, they said yes to, but it depends on what it is. And so for generally speaking, the healthcare ones, there were several that they said, this is a national issue, this isn't a state issue. We have to first hear what comes back from national before we move forward on this. So I definitely agree. But there were several that were COVID specific. Like, for example, resolution 6 was online learning. 14 was, and this one I was pleasantly surprised, alternative election requirements in case there's a disaster, like a pandemic, like we just went through. And another one was, as you mentioned, the mid-year cuts, to allow for opposing the mid-year cuts, so that we can have educational continuity and being fiscally responsible. And then there were others that I felt were impacted by COVID. So passing these were also timely. The pilot one I want to come back to, but resolution 4 was about pilot. And number 5 was about sharing resources among districts. Obviously, that's more critical now than ever. Hard to do, I'm sure, but very important. 13 was transfer of immunization data. Obvious, that one, this one's definitely going to be a talking point soon. 17 was addressing the digital divide, inequity in technology and broadband. That one is probably going to impact Shen less, but definitely something that we would want to support. I said I wanted to go back to 4. 4, the pilot, it has to do with districts not included in the determining payment, which pilot is payment in lieu of taxes. That's what pilot stands for. And so sometimes the district may only get 25% of whatever that payment is. And so the question I wanted to ask actually of this administration is what has that been like for Shen? How has that impacted Shen? Because I do wonder, again, this is timely because of COVID. And so it's asking for the power to come back so that the school districts are part of that discussion, that they're not left out of it from the municipalities. So
I could give you kind of a summary from my experience, and I look forward to Dr. Robinson adding more detail because he's seen a lot of this. But pilots are generally for economic development. You know, if you have a hard times in a district where someone can't pay taxes, that's not really a pilot. That's a person can't pay their taxes, and there's a way to work through that. I would use the term adjudicate through it to figure out how to resolve it. But pilots occur when a community says, I want more economic development. I want to have a reduction of taxes for someone bringing in a new business. So post-COVID, there probably will be a strong desire to bring in more business and offer pilots. So great that we brought new businesses in for the community, but not so great for us because those new businesses aren't absorbing the tax burden, and they get for a period of time they're not paying taxes. So by us knowing and having that in front of us, we can anticipate it better. And I think we have to kind of realize that's probably an outcome we're going to have to work through, knowing it earlier better. I don't know if we can stop it or say not do it, but we may have a voice in it, but at the same time, there's going to be a mood within the community to try to get as much economic growth as possible. Anything you want to add to that?
So I guess it depends on how you want to categorize it. From a dollar perspective, I think we're about $525,000 of our revenues, of 120 plus million in taxes that we collect. About 500,000 of it comes from pilot. So not a large percentage of our revenue base. However, and that varies because there's been higher than that at some point, and it will be lower than that at other points. I think the point that Mr. Presley made is a valid point, and I'm not sure if this resolution speaks to it completely, but it's something that's worth looking at more in a sense that as the country and the state look to expand the economy, there typically comes a lot of perks for corporations to come and do business. And sometimes those perks are good for some, but not so great for others. So I think the conversation around pilot is a worthwhile conversation. The question is, what's the focus of the conversation? Because if it impacts this district so differently, some places don't have industries that they have to worry about pilot payments in lieu of taxes, while other places do. So I think it's much more so probably in the context of how does this play out in the economic development cycle? Because we don't want to be on the side of saying no to pilot payments because it's a vehicle for economic development. Economic development lends to a broader tax base. And we don't want to say yes to pilot payments without some of the restrictions that were in place over the past several years, which schools have learned to manage. What I mean by that, the phasing in or phasing out of the pilot sequence. So that's why I think the context of this becomes as important as the specific resolution itself.
Yeah. So I kind of see it as NISBA said, yes, districts should get closer to the pilot decision, and I think we would agree with doing that. So from the mechanics of the meeting, I don't see a conflict. I think this is also an issue that relative to, fighting for closing the digital divide for everybody, getting more online instruction of the highest quality, not as big a deal. Unless someone wants to disagree with me, I think that the ones that really impact quality education, so that across the state we've got the best we can possibly get our students, for everybody to benefit, are probably more impactful than that.
And then just for a matter of process, so let's say that all the yeses go through, or actually, I know from watching one, it doesn't always happen that way. But, so what next? Then they go to, because some of these things have to be passed at the state level. So what's next, like pilot, for example?
All of them. I mean, this is our lobbying organization.
Right.
So as I was explained to Dr. Robinson, I think my first or second year on the board, he said, around December, some really unusual things start happening in the State House in terms of where the money is going to be and what's really going to be there in terms of school budgets. Now that was during the era where we had a lot of gap elimination adjustment going on. Now in a much different era where we really have no idea what's going to happen at the state level, because a lot of things are probably going to be in a flux. But it's great that school boards are saying this is what we're going to fight for and fight hard for. It's great that the superintendent's organization, their lobbying organization, is probably going to be doing something very similar with what they see as important. Same thing for NISBA as our teachers union, and probably other advocacy organizations. So what will probably happen is, as those voices start to speak, and hopefully they do it coherently, there will be some development of the budget in December reacting to that, because those are probably the key stakeholders. Okay, and then the governor, because we're a state where the governor pretty much decides a lot more than the budget and what policy comes from it than most other states. That'll get brought forward, and then you'll see this negotiation between the Assembly and Senate and governor, and hopefully our voices will be heard then, and then when we do the lobbying day in March, and any letters or other advocacy that can be done in between. Ideally, the more we're aligned to other groups as the School Board Association, the better off we'll be. The last thing you want to do is sort of have one group pit against the other, because that allows political figures to kind of do this and then run with what they want. You want to have it where all the key stakeholders are saying pretty much the same thing.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Great job, Bob.
Thanks.
Okay. Move to action items. And Bob is right. I mean, this is, it'll be an interesting year, and really December is the time that we start gearing down, and then February starts all the lobbying. That's usually your kickoff to lobbying. So like Bob said, the voices are starting to congregate now. Okay, so for our action items, adoption of special education plan. Can I get a motion? Gusta first.
I motion.
Christina's first, and we'll take Gusta second. Any comments? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, no nays, motion passes. Second, adoption of technology integration plan. Can I have a motion? All right, Todd's going first, Bob is going second. Any comments, questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Third, adoption of student services plan, AIS and RTL. Motion. Gusta first, Bob is second. Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Fourth, approval of professional learning plan. Can I have a motion? Gary's first, Gusta second. Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Business items, change order, rotary lift. Can I have a motion? Bob is first, Gusta second. Any comments or questions?
So in this one, we actually didn't spend, we underspent, and so we're just reallocating the credit, the 27.9.
Kathy, you have an explanation for the change order? Pat, can you come forward?
Oh, I didn't see her.
We just didn't spend it, so we're just moving it out. Okay, you don't have to come. Thank you. That's a good position to be in, that's all. Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. BOCES Cooperative Bid Resolution for Universal Waste. Can I have a motion? Bob is first.
Motion.
Bob is first, Christina second. Any comments or questions?
This I think is a good thing, a good way to use BOCES for the cooperative bidding. I don't know how extensively we do this, but it's, so I know we have a purchasing agent and we do our own bids, but this looks like an efficient way to, for a lot of districts to benefit, talking about sharing services, although this is at the BOCES level, but it's a good thing.
Okay. All in favor? Motion passes. Mrs. Bush, staffing recommendations?
Yes, thank you for allowing them on the board agenda tonight. I just have 3 retirements I'd like to recognize. Denise Barb is retiring from food service after 17 years with the district. Diane Callahan is retiring after 24 years in the district as a senior school monitor. And Rhonda Westcott is retiring after 31 years, and she has been a cleaner in those 31 years, most recently at the district office. So those are the retirements.
Thank you, Mrs. Bush. Can I have a motion? Naomi's first, Gus is second. Any comments, other than, wow, that is amazing, those years. Congratulations. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay. Our last piece on this agenda is for the good of the order again. Any topics that anybody wants to bring forward as dialogue. The only one piece that I wanted to remind everybody that October 7th, I know I did sign up for that, was the Equity and Inclusivity Workshop through NISBA. Our own Dr. Robinson will be sitting on that panel. That will run from 12 to 1:30 that day. Yeah, my comments. Anybody else have anything?
So actually, I wanted to see if our student rep had a comment, but if not, I just wanted to follow up on a couple things. One, what is the status of our backpack program? So just giving you time, Grace, to think of.
There's not sending a report in the front
Yeah.
of us.
Becky actually updated us. Was it last meeting, or
Yeah.
might have been the last meeting?
And it was because I went to make a donation and they said that the district wasn't accepting, that was why.
No, we always accept that.
Always, yeah. It's-
I have more to share. I just wanted to make sure that it was, okay. I have a feeling it's where it's being collected is. where it's
Donation of
changed.
what?
Food.
Oh, I thought we accept donation of checks and debit
Oh.
cards and cash. I'm smiling on the man.
Oh, yes, I can tell. Your eyes are laughing. And then the other one is specific to, I asked about it at the last meeting, and it was about, what can we do so that our public we can actually hear their voice in a meeting. And I know that we're sensitive to them, because of the limitations of the room. But what can be done so that they can maybe stream in or have an opportunity to speak?
Yep. So I think we talked about that in email. I know we were not in favor of a larger venue, only because at some point you would need to cut who would be able to attend, and we'd never want to do that, because then you'd be cutting off people's voices, and we certainly do not want to do that. Dr. Robinson, I don't know with IT how we could,
We're not prepared yet.
I'm sorry,
We're not prepared yet
to do that? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So we can certainly, we'll continue to bring that forward, Naomi. All right. Yes, Gary?
I have a request for, directed to Dr. Robinson. Every time we have a significant change in our central administrative structure, provides an opportunity, monetarily, but more so distribution of functions and so forth and so on. We do have a significant retirement coming up, and I was hoping that you'd be able to share what you're thinking or perhaps planning with regard to that.
We will. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You always take advantage of those opportunities. Yes,
Especially to celebrate.
yes, we will be sharing some organizational restructuring with the board. Probably not after the new year, to be honest with you, because we want to transition in and out of some things.
Any other comments? Christina, Todd, you're all good? Okay,
All good.
all right. All right. Then, motion to adjourn. Naomi's first, Gusta is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Meeting adjourned.
All right. Thanks for your help. Over the years, I thought that went reasonably well. There's room to talk through and hash out. Okay, I can shut this down, correct?
That participation in negotiations early on has been kind of a touchy thing. We don't
Oh, my goodness, yes.
suffer any loss in that.
I did. I just wanted to read what I signed, and that I understood it.
On the unimproved.
It was, yeah, it's my check and balance. So Naomi.
You know, I don't really remember the details, but we were totally shut out at the time. When Colberg Village was first built, the IDA that dealt with that was not our local IDA. It was something in Scotia Glenville or something. How that happened, I have no idea. They're really shut out.
Yeah, that's right.